Yeah, I think that ultimately, I mean, I'm kind of like complaining, but the reality is, it's not a bad thing to be in the middle of town. I live very close, so I guess I've just become a little bit spoiled with the idea that
Mm.
okay, and you max yourself out to the point where actually you're operating 100% all the time. So that you step out, then suddenly becomes a thing. So what I've got to do is plan to do that a bit more, and I should be better.
But, but do you like talking on the phone though? Because I would rather go out and see a human being than having to be on a phone call. And if somebody wants to call me, I'm just like, can we please meet instead? Really?
I really have a problem with the phone without eye contact. Like, so video is much preferred for me,
Yeah.
especially for people I don't know well. Because I kind of I think this fundamentally is a lack of confidence actually, because I'm
Mm.
looking for micro expressions that okay we have a rapport, we're getting someplace. Whereas if I don't have that, a person I don't know, whatever, I can like turn quite cold, and my communication isn't as smooth because I think there's self-doubt in there. So I'm much better in person and I'm much better on video,
Mm.
very bad audio only. So audio only, I only like to do that if I know the person so well, there's no need to even think about sort of where you're at with rapport and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, folks, that's an interesting topic, isn't it? What's your like favorite communication channel? Have you psychologically have you done any psychoanalysis on yourself on this, folks? What do you prefer, in person, audio only, or video? What is your vibe? Let us know in the comments. That'll be good to know. Anyway, welcome everybody. It's Brain Food Live on Air. It's episode 274, bringing it to you every Friday, no fail. And today, I'm very much looking forward to having this conversation because it is a topic that I think is a blind spot for me because I've always worked for a company that has fundamentally been like one office business, like a software company in one building, and I was the recruiter in that building. And it was like, okay, great, I know everyone. However, the vast majority of people are actually employed in companies that are massively distributed because they actually do physical things. These are companies that are supermarkets. These are companies that are, doing logistics. These are just proper companies, not just moving bits of information. They're moving things. And in those organizations, it turns out that a lot of the recruitment is actually not necessarily done by a central function. You have to push it out to the line because they're the persons doing the interviews, at the head, the office, the warehouse location. No point in dragging a warehouse person to your office. That interview happens over there. So there's a very different distribution of responsibilities for someone who's working in that frame. So today we're going to speak to some folks that have experience of working in this manner. We're also going to be speaking to people who have experimented with learning from organizations like this, and can we actually apply it to SaaS? Like, for instance, do we really need to centralize everything? Because perhaps maybe line managers can do a lot of the recruitment. So today, that's the topic. How hiring manager self-serve, how can TA enable the line? That is the value. Okay, folks, before we kick off, I just want to do some sound checks real quick. Can you hear me okay on Crowdcast? Let me know if the audio is fine there, folks. Comment in the chat if you can see and hear myself looking extremely bright. So sorry about the lighting here. And also our new co-host for the day, Andrea Lungulescu. Wonderful to see you. And thank you for dropping in on the show. We should be also broadcasting this live in multiple LinkedIn's, folks. So if you can hear me on LinkedIn, let me know in the chat. And by the way, I can't see the comments there, but if you do comment on LinkedIn, I've got people out there fetching messages backwards and forwards, so I should be able to communicate with you from there. So make sure you can hear me there as well. Okay, cool. Looks like audio's fine. Andrea, I just dropped you in. So why don't you introduce yourself real quick? Who are you? What it is you do, Andrea?
Oh, now you caught me. Like, come on! We didn't prepare for this, Hung. I'm Andrea.
No
I'm
prep
not.
needed.
This is one thing to get straight. Yeah, I'm a principal talent partner. I've been doing talent acquisition for 14 years plus. Mainly technology, I have to be honest, but for the last year and a half, I'm also the founder of Talent Crunch, which is, I would say by now, probably Germany's most active talent community. It's not just talent acquisition, it's talent everything community. We are in Berlin. We started from Berlin, expanding to Germany and DACH and beyond. Very proud to be the community mama. We do a lot of events and a lot of things live and online. I'm obviously very hung up on your Again, no pun intended, Hung, on your all your work. So I'm really happy to be here, even if it's completely ad hoc. And I promise to make Adam proud. Promise it online too.
Hey, listen, Adam is always under consistent threat of being upgraded. He knows this. He knows that, his job is always on the line. His performance is so, vanilla. So, we need to always bring extra. So it's fantastic that you're here. No, but it's very seriously, shout out to Adam. He's going to be on the show today, but he's having a travel nightmare and he can't actually get home. So hopefully he's on a flight right now and he can get back to these kids. Anyway, great to have you on the show, Andrea. Let's just crack on. We have to thank our sponsors, folks, because without our sponsors, Brain Food Live cannot continue. And every week, a company comes up and basically make sure this type of conversation continues. So today, I am delighted to thank ZincWorks, folks. If you don't know Zinc already, I saw their stand yesterday in IHR. They were booming, busy. They are one of the premium, maybe the premium background checking software in the UK right now and beyond. They're one of the few companies that are able to do background checks across multiple countries and also cover things like, obviously, validate who the person is, but also validate the identity of who they are. Very, very important, I think, with regards to, the future that we see, this AI-enabled future. I'd be hugely surprised if fraud detection and validation doesn't suddenly escalate from being an administrative task that recruiters, all right, admin can do that. It's going to shoot up right at the top of our priority list because we are the ones that have to make sure the people coming into the companies are going to be the ones that they say they are. So check out ZincWorks if you want an all-in-one solution. I think there's zincwork.com. If you haven't got any solution to date, and you do manual reference checking and all that type of stuff, you've got to get with the program because that is going to change in 2025 for sure. And you could do no worse than check out ZincWork for that. I think they've got some sort of free trial on there as well, so you can check them out and without cost. Okay, cool. Let's get on with this. Andrea, did you read the newsletter yesterday? Not yesterday, but earlier this week. And did you have anything interesting was there anything interesting in there that you want to chat about?
There is always something interesting in there, being positive or being negative. And I have, oops, a few things stood out. I mean, I really loved the poll, actually. The poll for me was really good to see that people are helping get me out of here, kind of, So how do I upskill? How do I get myself to a new place where I can future-proof my career? You know me quite well, and this is something I'm supremely passionate about, building something out of your talent acquisition career. I think we need to expand what we do. I think talent acquisition as we used to know it, it's probably not sufficient anymore. So that's one thing I liked, and I can come back to it in a second. The second thing I really dug into was you put up information about how AI, it's prevalent, it's everywhere, Gen AI, just AI. However, we seem to be falling back in adoption. And this resonated with me a lot because I looked at a lot of research recently for my own benefit. And I have some thoughts in relation to the talent acquisition or the talent space and why we sadly fall behind when it comes to adoption or trying, with a caveat that it's also a cultural thing. I definitely see it here in Germany, probably much more than some of my acquaintances or friends see it in other countries in the world. That's a plus. And there's also something that I was really surprised to see, and I think I really disagree with the approach, honestly. Don't hate me. It's the viral, right? You put up this viral, I'm looking to hire 200, and I think it was 200 engineers in a week or something. The numbers were just not numbering for me. I thought to myself, okay. And then I looked at the post itself. I'm really curious to see if anyone brings that up today in the discussion with the hiring manager topic, because I thought to myself, that opens up doors, countless doors to so many mishaps. That's really so far away from everything I ever loved about talent acquisition. That's why I thought, okay, interesting viral stuff. Yeah. What's the point? What are we really looking to get at?
You know what? I'm pleased you brought that up, Andrea, because folks, if you didn't read this, it's actually really a quite interesting post, and I liked it for a lot of reasons. Because primarily on the marketing side, because the guy was actually trying to sell a an assessment tool. So he was saying, so the hidden context of this wasn't that hidden, but it was kind of a little bit on the not the first thing you noticed. So the first thing you noticed was, I am going to hire 200 engineers, and it was like, put your email address in, and I will send you the link to schedule an interview. And obviously, this thing went completely viral. I'm going to check it out now. How many views did we get? I don't know how many views. I can't read that, but he's got like 3,570 comments, right? So that's got to be into the millions. And for context, basically, the usually the most popular post I can do probably get 300 comments at max, and that really kicks in and sort of tops out around 50,000 views. So this thing has definitely got like 500,000 plus views, I would imagine. And from there must be like hundreds, maybe thousands of candidates he just harvested. But so number one, great viral line. But secondly, what was really interesting is, of course, this guy had just raised 25 million for his interview automated tool, and he was just going to pipe people through his tool. So he's actually cost himself no effort either. So anyway, I kind of liked it for those reasons, even though I can understand from various ethical reasons, maybe not the smartest thing. But great viral marketing. And yeah, really, I think I'm a believer in automated assessment, so I think there's going to be a good chance this thing's going to work. But yeah, just scrolling through these comments. Go on.
You put in, there was another article, right, about the LinkedIn privacy topic, and we all know that we're quite big on that, especially in Europe, especially in Germany. And then we all try to opt out of the LinkedIn privacy, don't use my data for AI training, and so on and so forth. And then here you have, how many, 3,000 plus comments, you said? I went through them originally until I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. And there were so many email addresses just spilled, just put them out there on the web for everyone to see. So I thought to myself, okay, if these two are not fighting against each other, I don't know what is. Because we talk privacy, and then all of a sudden off you go on a post like this and flooded with private emails.
Here's the thing, though. I think your concern with privacy varies according to how whether you're a giver or a taker, so to say. I mean, if you're a person in demand, then suddenly privacy is like, oh, you got to totally defend yourself and protect. But if you're a job seeker like these folks are, it's like you have to lower the barriers to your privacy. You have to kind of jettison some of it to say, right, I'm looking for a job, I'm going out there. So I think basically what I've learned from this and what you've just said is that your privacy concerns like vary over time. And you can imagine someone, let's say, who's very certain in their job, they're very happy in their careers, they're going to have quite high barriers because anything coming at them is going to be annoying. But if you're a job seeker, you probably wouldn't mind so much if someone got your email from somewhere, messaged you with a genuine opportunity. I would say, yeah, you probably would be less annoyed than would otherwise be the case. But you're right, though. We have to juggle between privacy and publicity. How do we deal with that? I think we can overcorrect either way. So you're absolutely spot on. Okay, a quick touch on one of the things you said earlier about the adoption rate. Because you said something about you have a theory as to why recruiters have been slower to adopt on AI than perhaps they might have expected. What's the theory, Andrea?
I'm not sure if it's a theory. It's an observation, maybe more, from at least the environment I'm in. And again, I have to highlight the fact that I'm in a conservative environment, even though I'm in Berlin, still Germany, right? Still, there is a quite a conservative approach to anything that is perceived as, oh my God, you might steal, insert anything from me. And I think what I observed in my environment and in my companies as well is that there is still a lack of understanding of what the benefits are. And there is a lot of requirement for, I need to understand the benefits before I actually try and test and sort any sort of implementation. And of course, when there is a back and forth, you won't understand the benefits until you give it a try. Let's start with a small sample, see some results. If it doesn't work, so having this more of an agile approach to things, we are maybe not quite there as much as we would want to, at least in the talent space. I'm not saying that this applies to everyone. I've seen wonderful organizations pushing and getting on this, let's say, on the bandwagon with all the things related to AI and to technology in general. But there is a lot of reluctance. That's one thing. The second thing, which can be quite a reasonable rationale for not getting on the bandwagon, is, oh my God, what's going to happen with my job? And this can even start at the very high level, right? It can even start with your CHRO. Yes, they need to save money, but at the same time, their own job might be threatened. So I think from my observation in the industry, again, at least in the areas I'm around, I observe that there is a reluctance to, hey, let's test, let's implement, let's try, let's play, risk. You may win or you may lose. It may work or it may not. And that's why I think that the findings are how they are. And also there is there is a report from McKinsey. I used to read, I have it open as well, talking about the state of AI, not Gen AI, overall in technology. And I think this is not only in talent that we observe this. We would love to go in that direction, but there is still not a lot of adoption in many cases. Let's see. I believe that these things will change.
Very, very interesting on many, many points. Folks, I'd love to get your thoughts on this as well. Do you think like our function TA is a little bit slow in adopting AI? If not, what's your comment? And if so, what is your theory why? A couple of really interesting ones there. I like the idea that the risk is maybe more obvious than the reward, right? Because it's like, oh, if I mess this up, then maybe it's a lawsuit, or maybe I've jeopardized something. Whereas the return is still more ambiguous, so it's more vivid what the risk might be compared to the reward. Maybe that's an issue. Could also be an issue, as you mentioned, about maybe our adjacency with HR and all the rest of it. We're very much, there's rules, there's compliance. We're the ones that are telling hiring managers got to do this, that, and the other. In fact, that's one of the topics that we're going to touch on today. Like, if you're going to push out more responsibilities to hiring managers, how do you make sure, for instance, that you have a fair interview? For instance, that's a constraint to the manager. So maybe we inherently have more of a constraint mentality, perhaps. Yeah, interesting, folks. It's one of these, probably worth a brief live on it, because we can't be left behind in this. We have to obviously be fast adopting, but it is a concern if we get a sense that maybe that's not where we're at. Anyway, Andrea, we're moving on to the topic of hiring manager self-serve, or how do we empower hiring managers? What's your take on this? Have you got any thoughts on how best to do this? I mean, even if you haven't worked for the mind's eye of a logistics company, but there are times when you need to empower a manager to go and do things that they feel as if they don't know how to do or not comfortable doing. How have you got any thoughts on how we best do that?
How to best do it? I'm not sure I can answer that best, but I can tell you that it has been the case actually at Wayfair. We were completely decentralized. I mean, it's a global organization, and there were a few things. One of the things I looked into was the warehousing, because you mentioned it earlier, right? Or the operational part of things. And definitely there, they had implemented a system through which the hiring managers in the warehouses were self-serving. With the support of the talent teams, what happened they were attending hiring days or training days on site in the warehouses. And in some of the warehouses, we even had people taking care of HR topics, but not talent acquisition specific necessarily. That's one thing. And then when we went global with India coming in as well, what happened was that we had to keep something centralized, meaning imagine the base process of hiring for whatever position. However, a lot of it had to do with cultural differences and expectations for the roles that were to be delivered in those particular locations. So then we would decentralize some of the aspects. And that meant that either they had talent acquisition people there, or in other cases where more high volume, like you mentioned, right? High volume was involved. The hiring managers would have access to a library, should we call it a library, for themselves to pull and use whatever needed to be used. We were just in the background checking to see from time to time, like quality control. are we still holding on to the standards that we originally imposed? So definitely, I think it's something beneficial. I can't wait to hear the speakers talk about it, especially in the space of very large organizations, completely decentralized. So really, really keen to hear their opinions on it.
It's a fascinating one because obviously empowerment is obviously letting go a little bit of responsibility, but you can't let the quality control go, which is why actually micromanagement comes in. But at the same time, you can't scale this out. Like typically, you're going to have a very sort of if your policy is to have a sort of decentralized recruiting team, line managers does a lot. Inherently, you're not going to have a massive TA team that can possibly take over. It's like you have to have that degree of trust. Anyway, let's bring on our guest. I can see Debbie here as well. Deborah, in fact, she might. Let's bring her on. I don't think maybe her debut here. And also, I think Mary Kay was in the background. Let me see if she's there, and we can bring her on as well. I think Arjan may actually be ill, so I don't think he's joining us. But let me just see if he's on here. If he is on here, I'll bring him on. There she is. Hello, how are you?
I'm good. It's nice to see you both. How are you doing?
Yes, very well. Great to see you, Deborah. For the folks who don't know you, Deborah, can you quickly introduce yourself? What it is you do?
Yeah. So I'm from Paris. I'm based in Berlin, like Andrea. And yeah, I've been doing HR for the last 12 years. I've done pretty much everything. Also spent a lot of time in TA, and these days I'm self-employed, and I do leadership development. Focus on consulting, coaching, and training.
Fantastic stuff. And Deborah, you used to work for Blinkist, didn't you? And I think Blinkist was probably one of the first organizations that really had a very different style of recruiting, I felt. This sort of very, very interesting to learn about from that background here. So thanks for coming on to the show. And we have Mary Kay as well. Mary Kay Baldino, wonderful to see you digitally. We caught up for was it an ice cream? Do we have an ice cream? No, we had a kombucha. We had a drink, didn't we?
Yeah, had a drink.
We had a nice drink when Mary Kay was in London last week. So great to see you back. Hopefully you had a great trip. For the folks who don't know you, can you quickly introduce yourself, Mary Kay?
Sure.
Who are you? What it is you do?
Hi, everybody. So I lead talent acquisition for a healthcare technology company called R1 RCM. We basically manage the kind of US healthcare revenue part of the cycle. And I have a varied background in HR and TA across a lot of different functional areas. I'm a Lean Six Sigma data geek, and really enjoy all of Hunk's content and joining in on these conversations occasionally.
Mainly because you're in it, Mary Kay. But here we are. Wonderful to have you all on the show. Let's just talk about this. What are the key differences in the role of talent acquisition when you have a more like a centralized role where TA is considered to be the controller of everything? Hiring managers are kind of pulled in when we need them, compared to a more distributed way where actually maybe TA gives some strategic direction, but in fact, there's a lot of like delegated responsibilities to distributed organizations. So maybe we'll go to you firstly, Deborah. What are your thoughts on this?
So I feel like in the traditional recruiting model, the recruiter is spending, unfortunately, a lot of time like doing logistics and communication, and has less time to do more of the coaching, advising, strategic work, which you can then do better, I think, in a decentralized or self-serve model where you're kind of acting as like the expert. You're delegating all of the like lower tasks in a way, like the more operational tasks, and you can really focus on like answering questions, coaching people, advising. I think you're also becoming like sort of like the conductor of an orchestra. So you're like, trying to coordinate everything that's happening instead of just focusing on a few roles.
Okay, so you've just introduced an idea that I didn't even realize, but it may well be true. So in a decentralized way, maybe the primary person you interact with is not the candidates, it's going to be the hiring managers, right? So you're actually speaking internally to hiring managers rather than facing externally to candidates, Whereas if you're working as a sourcer, you're working as, as you say, traditional centralized function, then of course you'd be interacting with candidates all the time. So you have a very different population of people you'd be speaking to. Number one difference. Very good. Deborah, go on, you want to say some more?
Yeah. I think it's just a different way of doing stakeholder management, right? Like, as you said, like, how do you interact with candidates is different than how you interact with hiring managers. Yeah, so massive difference there.
Thank you, Deborah. Any thoughts on that, Mary Kay? Maybe some of the differences that you'd like to pick up?
So I'll be contrary and disagree just slightly. I think the great talent acquisition people are advisors and partners, regardless of whether it's centralized or decentralized. I think that their role is different in the sense that when you are a centralized function, you have a greater degree of control over the incoming candidates that managers are going to see. And so you have to be very, very good at gathering up, vetting, and putting in front of a manager that slate of candidates. So there's a very high degree of accountability there. But you should still be taking it very much an advisory role, because in both a centralized and decentralized model, the hiring managers make almost all of the decisions. Recruiters don't actually drive decisions as much as they're driving process in both models. So I think that, for recruiters to see themselves as advisors is important either way. The difference I've seen in a decentralized model is that the recruiters are operating out of the day-to-day and into more of a strategy, oversight, and kind of training kind of role, where they're providing that really structured process. They're having to think about things from a process controls perspective. So ensuring that quality is very much about having good process controls. And that's different. It's a different skill set for recruiters. It's a different day-to-day routine. It's very different in terms of where the accountability sits. So having really good mindset around sort of a RACI chart and who's responsible versus who's accountable for different activities is critical.
Really good observations, Mary Kay. By the way, again, everything everyone's saying is just sparking ideas in my brain, and that's not because I'm particularly intelligent. It's actually because I'm pretty dumb. Because I've just realized something that should be very obvious to everyone. There's actually three models, isn't there? Because there's like a hyper centralized talent acquisition where the talent acquisition folks do make all the decisions. So imagine you have a graduate entry program. Typically, that is where they are making the choices. The hiring managers, takes the candidates. Like they're the ones that just take the allocation. I think that also happens in professional services companies. The big consultancies, for instance, the managers are making the calls. There's actually a talent team that makes the decision. Then you have the middle group, which I think is a lot of people, my experience, where you're not making decisions, but you have some control over the quality of the candidates. Let's say you're speaking to the candidates before the hiring manager typically, and then you have this model where the hiring manager actually is probably interacting with all of the candidates, and your touch point may be coming later. Quality control it. Maybe you're some sort of a bar raising champion. I don't know, but your positioning is different with regards to the candidate side. Okay, there's three models, folks. I didn't know that, so probably everyone did. But anyway, I'm making progress. I love the growth I get from Brainfood Live. Okay, great. Andrea, your thoughts on this? So relationships, the type of conversations you're having with different sort of populations. What's your sense on the skills that are required? Are they the same recruiters do the different jobs? Or are there certain different communication styles that suit one or the other?
The one thing I thought about was when you were talking about these three, all I could think about was, but they exist together, but they go together, but they are usually together. I don't think about larger organizations, right? You will probably have that central team, like you mentioned, early careers, right? Or hiring for graduates or working students, and that's the central. And then you have this mixed model, and then you do have also the decentralized part as well. In larger companies, I've seen it, and I believe that it exists elsewhere as well. So yeah, that's one thing. And then with regards to skills, I think for all of them, there are some base skills which I would assume that, in my opinion at least, all good talent acquisition partners should develop if they don't have, or should improve if they already have. And those would be things such as the communication piece. And when I say communication, I'm not referring to pleasantries. I refer to understanding how to adapt your communication style to your stakeholders. And they can be graduates, they can be your colleagues, they can be your external candidates who can be executives, and they can be the business itself, right? Anyone in the organization. So that would be one thing, which I think it's globally applicable. I don't think this is a skill. Maybe this is more of a personal trait, but I think all the talent acquisition individuals should develop grit. So we deal with a lot of rejection, regardless of which of these three parts we live in. And there is a lot of pushback, a lot of rejection. So I think grit is something that we should all strive to develop. Being resilient and being able to just go over and over things, regardless of the pushback or regardless of the number of no's we receive. So I think there are some base skills. There are more than these that everybody should possess. And with regards to when we come to decentralized, I think ability to manage uncertainty, right, or ambiguity is something that really comes in place, because you give away the power, like you mentioned before. You really have to not micromanage. You have to understand and trust that the training you've done is enough and the things you've put in place are enough, and then step back. So dealing with the unknown, again, it's resilience in a way. I'm sure there is a lot to add. I don't know, Debbie, what would you add?
Yeah, I very much agree with you. I think you nailed it. And I also agree with what Mary Kay said earlier around training. I think in a decentralized model, like, you're really there to like upskill the team basically, and like expect to get questions like, how do I make an offer? How do I write a job description? How do I write this tricky email, to a candidate? So yeah, you're much more, sharing your expertise and upskilling the team. Yeah.
Very, very good. By the way, I think my mic was off earlier, so and it's just still flicking backwards and forwards. So it might sound a bit weird. If that does, let me know, folks, because I'm not sure I can do anything about it, but I'd just like to be further annoyed if that continues.
You're like a baritone, Hank.
You know what? I wish I was. I think my career would go so much further with this slightly deeper. That in fact is the topic of Brainfood Live. Like, what is the impact of your voice? Like, can we all do some voice coaching out there? I think we probably could. And how much further does your career travel? I have a friend of mine who's actually she was a trained actress. So she's been in theater, been in movies, etc. And she's now setting up a consultancy on voice, because she thinks that actually with loads of people coming into Zoom and doing these conversations and all this type of stuff, actually no one's been trained on it. We haven't been trained on how to carry a conversation beyond our own domestic learnings, which is not necessarily suitable for different professional contexts. So yeah, I might just bring that into play at some point. It would be an interesting one to try. Okay. In terms of one of the concerns, I think, for a person going into a more decentralized setup is, okay, how do I get like candidate consistency? How do I make sure that the hiring managers are interviewing at the level that we want and not just having the cozy chat? What's the best way to approach this? Because I think we all agree that's probably what we want. But is there do we design something, roll it out? Like what's the approaches that we can do to help the hiring managers improve consistency and quality without being that overbearing, horrible HR person that's just causing concerns? Any thoughts on this? Mary Kay, you got any ideas?
Sure. Yeah, I think that rolling out a decentralized kind of approach depends on a couple of critical factors. The first is demand planning. You have to be able to predict when the business needs to hire certain talent segments and on what kind of timetables. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to plan for how you're going to deliver a pipeline of candidates. And I've never seen this model work in an environment where, you know, you truly had to go out and directly source all of your candidates. But I'm talking about jobs where, you know, you can depend on a pipeline of active candidates coming and applying to your job through more traditional advertising or programmatic approaches. So having demand planning is critical. And then I also think the other factor here is really understanding and having a deep job analysis done that will help you drive appropriate screening. There's so much technology that you can use to help screen candidates, and AI will get better at this. I don't think it's particularly great at it right now. It's really more of a keyword kind of thing right now, but you can use screening technology if it's based on an appropriate job analysis to help you put sort of a stack ranked candidate pool in front of the hiring managers that they can then reach out to very quickly after the applications are received. So a light touch kind of using technology eliminates the need for recruiters to get on a phone screen or to actually touch base with candidates. Man, who the candidates usually want to interact with first is a hiring manager. I mean, everybody wants to talk to the person who's the actual decision maker. So if you can help them get in front of a hiring manager more quickly, they will be tolerant of you asking them some screening questions or doing a light touch kind of assessment as part of the application process.
Yeah. Any thoughts on this, Debbie?
Yeah. So one of the tricks I found at Blinkist to ensure that candidate experience was consistent and that we weren't dropping the ball on processes was I had like a blocker on my calendar on Mondays to kind of go through all of the pipelines to kind of see what's happening, you know? And sometimes I would discover, okay, like someone dropped the ball, you know, and I would nudge them, I would talk to them, and then I would keep a close eye on the hiring managers. And again, it's about, you know, relationship building, having that trust and being able to go to them and be like, hey, like, this is not good. What are we doing about this, you know? And then another thing that worked very well was we had 3 levels of support. So with some hiring managers, we would say, okay, like this person, they know what they're doing. They've been hiring for many years. They get it. So we're going to be involved very lightly. So we'll be involved at the beginning and at the end where it's most critical. But throughout the process, we just trust that things are going well. And if they need support, of course, we're there. And then we would have a medium level of support and a heavy level of support. And typically the heavy level of support was for hiring managers who either like had so many roles they couldn't keep up, or for hiring managers who were really struggling, that never done hiring before, or it just wasn't their thing. And then we were there to like help them, like handhold, and we were there at every step of the process. And sometimes we would even do traditional recruiting with them, where we would handle all of the communication and everything, just because we tried and it didn't work. And like we're like, okay, let's switch gear.
Okay, really interesting. I want to stay with this a little bit, Deborah. How do you do that without sort of insulting the manager? It's just like, okay, back to school. I mean, the hiring manager might just feel, you know what, that's just rude. Like how that strikes me as quite delicate. So how do you deal with this?
Honestly, we never had any issues. We discussed that in the kickoff. I mean, in the intake meeting with the hiring manager, and we just discussed like, you know, what's your capacity right now? How many roles do you have? How confident do you feel? How much experience do you have with hiring? And yeah, we try to sort of gauge like where they're at. And then, you know, if issues arose, halfway, you know, we would have the conversation. And as I said, like it was about building the relationship. I think it's much more difficult to have that conversation if like, you know, you're new and you don't know the person, but yeah, if you know them for quite a while. And I think also it was part of the culture. Blinkist is famous for having a really good feedback culture where like direct communication is encouraged. And also it's in Germany, so different culture as well, much more direct. I think all of that plays a role. I don't know how in the UK how this would go.
I'd be very interested myself. Any other thoughts on how to handle that particular moment where, yes, you want to give the hiring managers, like the hiring managers have got variable levels of comfort with doing this. And obviously we want to get everyone to a level where they are comfortable. We understand people in different sort of levels. How do we, and some of them might revert back to bad levels. So how do we handle that politically? Any thoughts, Mary Kay? You've had any experience or theories on best way to do it?
Yeah, I think it's really, really important to have good champions within the business leadership for this kind of a decentralization, especially if your company has taken a more centralized approach in the past, right? And so if you're coming from a place where, you know, recruiting is a relatively new concept and specialization recruiting is more of a relatively new concept, then it's a different challenge than if you've been centralized and you're decentralizing. I've worked in environments where we've moved from centralized to decentralized. And so having that business leader champion for the concept is really, really important. And a lot of times I've had the most success working through this with operations teams that were already very much skilled at process discipline. So it was helping them with moving to this decentralized approach in that way. Training is key, change management is key, and you're always going to have some managers who are not as good at this, but that's true regardless of what the model is. And so what kind of supports are needed, but then also where does the accountability come in? You know, if they're struggling and they don't have the skills and you've provided them with the same supports and the same structure as everybody else, then it just can become kind of a performance management conversation, and that should be driven by the business leaders and making sure that they have the data and the feedback on that person's performance as a hiring manager in this decentralized process enables them to do that. But you know, it is really, really important to have that agreed upon up front, or you just end up in this endless loop where you have, you know, continued problems with hiring managers struggling with it and then failing. I think the oversight that's provided by the recruiting function is critical, and some of that is data driven, right? You have to have good dashboards for this, but it also can be, you know, that intervention kind of thing that Deborah was talking about, where you're picking up the phone and saying, so I'm seeing that this is not going well, let's talk about it, right? That sort of coach mentality of, you know, what's causing you to struggle with this, and sort of meeting people where they're at and able to help them up level their performance, because everyone can get better at recruiting. I feel like interviewing skills, for example, are an area where no matter how many times you do it, you can always get a little bit better at it. And so if you're bad at it, you can improve. It's a learned skill.
Yeah, very, very good. Loads of ideas bubbling away in my brain right now, particularly, in fact, I'll come to them a bit in a moment, because we always have to take a mini break in the middle of this show, folks. A reason why is because Brain Food Live obviously has to come off air at some point, and it would be a desperately bad thing if this was an end of a conversation rather than the beginning of one. So, folks, if you're interested in thinking about how you move from a centralized, decentralized type of recruitment setup, and how the role of the recruiter changes, now is the perfect time to connect with everyone else who's doing the same thing and interested in this topic. So grab your LinkedIn URL, stick it in the comment thread if you're watching this on Crowdcast. If you're watching this on any of the LinkedIns, do the same. Just grab your LinkedIn URL and stick it in a comment. Then make sure you connect with everyone who's done likewise. We're going to basically say that as a default. Okay, this person's happy to connect with you. And the worst case is you're going to walk away with a bunch of connections that you may wish to continue a conversation with. Why not? Okay, some thoughts on this. Like, firstly, how do we know there's poor performance amongst that distributed group. The technology is getting better, and I was going to introduce you all. We have Interview Intelligence now. We'll come to that in a second. But before this happened, lots of companies don't have any way of recording interviews or whatnot. How do we get a signal that some things are going well or not? Like, do we have any sort of ways to measure that? Anybody, any thoughts?
I mean, I think there are data-driven ways to measure it. When I see, for example, hiring managers who are rejecting a larger percentage of candidates than their peers or vice versa, maybe they hire every single person that they meet. That's a red flag. It's an opportunity to say, okay, what is going on here? You can, when you're talking about large volumes of hires, you can get to a predictive model where you say what normal looks like and what appropriate quality control looks like, right? In terms of how many people should be passing the assessment, how many people should be, passing an interview. You can, look at recorded feedback from hiring managers. So what kind of comments are they entering? What are the rating scales that you're using? So if you're using your technology, your ATS to collect that feedback, you can monitor that and do quality control through that as well. And then there's, really live human intervention too, where I have on my existing team, recruiters or managers who will actually sit in on interviews to observe whether or not the hiring manager actually knows what they're doing. And the training model should, ideally include live practice so that people are actually, they're not just learning a concept, but they're learning how to apply the concept to how to interview appropriately. So, it's like any other kind of quality control process. You have to look at like where are the points where the process could break down, and do we have a plan in advance on how we're going to ensure that it doesn't. So there's always a way to do that.
That's really good. Again, a few comments here to say a high rejection rate is actually a sign of poor performance. I mean, is that generally the case? Is that an obvious red flag? And people are nodding their heads on this. Why is that, Deborah? Like, why do you feel strongly if this person is rejecting? Maybe is that not quality control, for instance? Like,
yeah, for me, it's always a bit of a red flag where at least I want to dig deeper and see what's happening and what's the rationale. Because I think unless you start talking to candidates and like going into screenings, like you can get a sense for the market. And I think what I've observed is sometimes hiring managers have very high expectations, and so they don't even go into those conversations. And there's also bias, right? Of like, oh, I want someone like me, or this or that. So I think I would say it's a red flag. I would look into it. It doesn't mean that there is a quality issue, but it's something to look into for sure.
Yeah. What were your thoughts, Andre? Yeah, go on.
You know what I thought when I was hearing the answer from Mary a bit earlier? I thought, let's make sure that everybody understands the same thing when we say Apple. Because sometimes we may train, we may all be in the same room, talk about the same thing, and leave with completely different understanding of the same thing. So one thing that I personally learned through experiencing this in corporate especially was, let's make sure everybody understands the same thing from the same terminology and the same process. The second thing was touched upon earlier with building. I think one thing that on the hiring manager side maybe has a bit more weight, sadly, still, is the fact that they would probably respond better to their peers. So if we are able to have a select group of, call them however you want, let's call them ambassadors because I can't think of any other word right now. If they can act as our advocates and then in turn be the ones who help us check. So be our partners when we do quality control, be our partners when we do feedback rounds with the hiring managers, and really be our voice sometimes. This can help, because sadly, we are still not past egos. We are still not past talent acquisition. What's the value in some organizations? So I found that having these kind of ambassadors or partners or spokespersons, if you want, for talent, but from the business side, that helps. And another thing was the benchmarking. I think it goes hand in hand with this. Let's make sure Apple means Apple for everyone. Do we all have an understanding across the board, being in your decentralized locations, being in your early careers? Do we have an understanding of what we want? And can we benchmark it? Can we, if we hire for a warehouse in London and a warehouse in Berlin for an operator, do we have a clear understanding of what this operator has to do in the same locations, being the fact that it's the same job? And this, I think, in my opinion, comes down to benchmarking and having some sort of taxonomy, if you want, where we understand what the individuals are supposed to do. That's easier than to control the quality, I think.
Yeah, very good. Go ahead.
Can I just add two things on quality control? Also kind of piggybacking on what Mary Kay said earlier. One thing I've tried that works very well is to do shadowing interviews with hiring managers. So either inviting them to our interviews or us joining their interviews to kind of like see how they're doing it, give feedback, or so that can see also best practices. That works very well. And the last thing I want to say that kind of resonated in what Andrea said is about, like, again, like going back to relationship building. Like, I think there comes a point where like you can't control everything, like stuff is going to happen. And so it's about like building that trust with the hiring managers to make sure that, you know, when they become aware that, you know, they made a mistake or they have a question, they feel safe to come to you and be like, hey, I really messed up. Can you help me fix this? I think that's super important.
Yeah, really good point. I think that, sorry, Mary Kay, were you going to say something?
Yeah, no, that's an important culture thing. And then to Andrea's point, I think a lot of how you get there on everyone knowing what the apple is, right? What an apple look like is to really base your work on clear standards, and that doing a formal job analysis project can, at the start of decentralization, can really help with that.
I think one thing that's really coming through very strongly here is how important it is to build those relationships, because this allows you to have the conversations which actually make the change. Because even if you have the best recommendations, if you don't have the relationships with the people that then need to make those changes, you can imagine that that's not going to be accepted 100%. There's going to be people that simply wouldn't respond because the relationship's not being built there. So it's very important that that's a big component of anybody's work in business, but particularly in recruitment, particularly in decentralized recruitment, where you are delegating down a lot of this this type of work. I've got a question for you guys with regards to interview intelligence. So obviously I've been a big evangelist of this category for a while now. I'm a big believer in it. In genuine case, you know, you're recording the interview, you're transcribing it, you then use AI to do all kinds of data analysis in it, so you get ideas, get information basically that you could never have previously achieved, such as, you know, the talk time between candidate and interviewer, or, you know, what kind of questions were used. Was there a big variance between the types of questions asked for this type of demographic of candidate compared to that demographic of candidate? You know, is there different types of behaviors that we're seeing that we like a lot in these interviews, and the things that we don't like from the hiring manager's point of view? So I'm a big believer in the category. I think it's going to be something we're all going to use. Does the presence of this type of tech, which gives us insight into what's going on into interviews, do you think it promotes more decentralization in future? Because it seems that, okay, maybe we can step back a bit because we can actually monitor what's going on with more of our interviews. What are your thoughts on that? Deborah's nodding her head vigorously here.
Yeah.
Do you think this is the future for it?
I think it's going to enable it for sure. I mean, I'm a huge fan of decentralized hiring. I think it's the future, and yeah, but maybe I'm biased. Who knows?
I think technology is going to make it easier and easier to decentralize things. I think that because it supports process controls and supports process accountability. You know, even things like, these days, AI can be used to do all of your interview scheduling, reducing the time it takes to connect interviewers with candidates. There's so many places where you can leverage AI now to make the process shorter, simpler, easier to consume if you're a hiring manager. And so even answering frequently asked questions, right? You don't have to have a live human being answer all the questions when there can be a chatbot in the corner of the screen that's already got all those answers available. So, interview coaches can pop in to interviews easily. I think there's a lot of ways to leverage technology that will help companies move in this direction. The question is really going to be, one, do companies see this largely as a strategic move? Because that's what it takes to get the kind of investment of energy and time, change management, support for really good decentralization? Or is it, seen as sort of like cost savings or efficiency kind of model, in which case then you may end up with lower quality because you're just trying to cut costs or time. So it's balancing those things. And if it's a strategic move, then I think, the technologies there to help create some really, really good, excellent processes.
Yeah. Any thoughts on interview intelligence, Andrea? Do you think it's a big driver for decentralization?
100%. I was writing something down when you were answering before, and I thought, a huge fan. I remember when trying to implement it, one of the things that I used to say to the hiring managers was that AI can make us better humans. And they looked at me like I landed from a completely different planet. But what I actually meant was that with all of the information we can get from this, they, as the hiring managers, first of all, we can take a step back. We don't have to come and, piggyback and check and whatever. So we are off their back. And second, they have the chance to learn from their own observations of their own behavior and their own actions by just looking at this analysis that comes out automatically. So I totally believe that, as weird as it may sound, and I'm not necessarily a fan of it, I'm afraid of being replaced by a robot in a way, but I think it can make us better humans. So AI, interview intelligence definitely is something that we should take advantage of as fast as we can. It will just speed up our own improvement.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think because the feedback, so to say, it's not even feedback because it's just the data from the interview, right? So then it becomes very clean from from any kind of possible implication of hostility from the carrier of the feedback. Sometimes you're giving someone feedback. The reason why you feel defensive, you think, is this person just has an ulterior agenda in some way? But no, it's literally, look, this is how many minutes you spoke, mate. This is how many questions you asked. It's like literally the facts. And if you want to challenge that, you can actually replay it. So it's like, the evidence is there. And you can totally imagine, I think it's fair as well in the sense that hiring managers, if they're moving on this career track, that, as you mentioned earlier, Mary Kay, it becomes very much like weaved into their career progression. And, these are areas which, we as a business would like to see you improve. Then, if you want to go forward, then that's how you want to improve it. How very interesting. Okay, cool. Let's put ourselves in the shoes of a recruiter that is going from a centralized recruitment function, got a new job, moving to a decentralized function. What advice would you give this person? How are they going to be able to successfully, mindset shift into this new thing? How are they going to execute properly as the best recruiter in this new context? Any recommendations that way? Deborah, let's go with you to begin with.
Yeah, I would say just shift your mindset. If you were in a traditional setup, you were probably looking at a few trees. Now you're looking at the whole forest. And you still need to be able to go back to like the trees. So like shifting your mindset and your approach. And then again, build relationships.
that is going to be the next Brain Food Live. How on earth do I build relationships, Deborah? You know, like that's episode number next one. Like, how do I do it? Let's say I'm remote. I have no idea how to build a relationship. That is a good one to do. In fact, folks, let me know whether you want us to do on this. So I've talked about voice training, relationship building. It's a little bit adjacent to the core recruitment topics, but would they be interesting for us to do a show on that? Let us know in the comments. If we get enough support, I see no reason why we shouldn't do it. Okay, same question to you, Mary Kay. Your advice to a new recruiter, they've shifted into a new organization. What would you add to what Deborah has advised?
Yeah, I think she's spot on in terms of relationship building, because it's the most critical denominator, regardless of the model. You have to be somebody that the business can trust to provide guidance and coaching and help them get better at hiring. And so the other thing I would add is that not all recruiters are going to make that leap successfully. Some recruiters truly love the candidate contact and is the thing that really gets them up in the morning. And when you step into a decentralized model, that's not your focus. You are a process engineer in many ways. And so that is not the kind of job that every recruiter is going to enjoy and love and want to do. I think the recruiters who are already sort of talent advisors and really think broadly and strategically about talent are going to make that shift more successfully than recruiters who are people and really enjoy talking to candidates more, and that's very motivating for them. So if you're a talent advisor, this is an easier shift than if you're not.
That's just another great observation again, Mary Kay, because it actually has career implications, doesn't it? Like, let's say you're a recruiter, you're a specialist in, I don't know, recruiting data scientists, and actually your value to the market may just be this enormous sort of network of data science candidates you have, and that's, you've got to keep doing it to persist with this. But if there's a job that's actually, a decentralized role where your distance to the market is going to be a little bit more, then you can imagine you've changed your career more than you would initially think, because it looks like, oh, here's one recruiter job and here's another recruiter job. Actually, no, it's going to be quite different. So it could be different strokes, different folks. Very interesting. Very well. Good. Your final shout, Andrea. What's your advice to this person who's making this thought about shifting from centralized to decentralized?
On top of what was mentioned, I would add, keep your ego in check, because you'll have to let go of many things that maybe were very close to you before, and they will be handled by somebody else. It's okay. So I think we need to learn to just let go. I know for me, one that was really tough to do. So keeping egos in check.
Yeah. Really, really good. That may be a good topic in any case. And maybe another topic for Brain Food Live. How, in fact, do you keep your ego under check? Because the people who've got the biggest egos actually don't want to do that. Okay, that's about it, folks. We have to leave it there. We're a little bit over time. Another great conversation. So let's take the time to thank our wonderful guests. Deborah Cowlett, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Wonderful to get your input. Mary Kay Baldino, thank you so much for joining us as well. Great to see you. We'll both get you back for other shows. Maybe we could do the voice training one for you guys as well. That'd be amazing. Okay, have a good weekend, you two.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Ciao. Cool.
Hang on. Don't leave yet, Andrea.
No.
I thought that was pretty good.
Adam's role in, seriously.
Yeah, well, anyway, they were really good. I really enjoyed the show, but we have to cut it there. So thank you, folks, for joining Brain Food Live on air. We have a slight change of rhythm, by the way, in the next 4 weeks, because I will, unfortunately, not be in the UK. I say unfortunately, but I'm actually quite delighted that I'm not going to be in the UK in that 4 weeks. Just looking out the window, it's like, nah, I don't want to be here. But people don't know, I'm rolling into Asia for the next 4 weeks, I think. So we're going to be doing some regional tours. So the next show is going to be, I'll be broadcasting from Bangkok, hopefully, and it will be how to hire in Thailand in 2024 and 2025. So if you're interested in that country and the different sort of nuances of hiring there, make sure you sign up for that show. I'm going to be talking to recruiters who live and work in Thailand and work the Thai market. It'll be very interesting to figure out how exactly things work over there. And of course, that also means time zone shift, folks. So I do believe this will be happening at about 9 a.m. UK time. I believe it's that case. It's basically 2 p.m. Thai time that I'll be doing it from. So we're going to get some shifts around the diary. Register for it anyway. If you can't see it, you can always watch it on replay. Okay, folks, that's about it. You have a good weekend. I will see you next week. Cool. Pretty good, hey? I enjoyed that.
Wonderful. Yes, I loved it. And I really love having them both on the call and talking. There is so much more to unpack in this topic. So before you go and do another topic and another topic, I would say there is more to unpack on this one. There was this diversity topic. There was the diversity question, in the event description. And I was really hoping to get to that. We didn't have time for it. Because I thought I've seen it really, when you decentralize, this is one of the first things that goes out the door. Nobody thinks about it anymore. So in there is a real challenge to try and keep an eye on it, or really raise awareness to such a level that individuals responsible for hiring have an invested interest in keeping the ball rolling, and they understand for their own organization the benefit that diversity, inclusion, equality brings. Yeah. So I think it was...
You're absolutely right. I think the decentralized concept, I mean, those three sort of models, I think, there's like 5 shows that have emerged from this conversation. I usually struggle to have ideas for shows until I have one of them. Then the conversation sparks off. What I've got to do is just make notes on them and just make sure they're done. So yeah, you're absolutely right. D&I decentralized. How do we do that? And do so in a way that, still makes the manager feel empowered and feel like, they're with it, rather than there's an imposition. Or worst case, I think, might actually be if they then end up making tokenistic hires just to get the numbers up. You can imagine that scenario maybe occurring. The resentful D&I hire, that situation could occur.
Yeah.
So yeah, interesting. Anyway, what are you doing this weekend? Anything interesting?
It depends if you are offline or online.
Oh
no, I'm just kidding.
Let me quickly end the broadcast.
No, just kidding. Actually, no, it's not as bombastic as you may think. I have seeing friends, but I had I have this survey that we launched, right, with the Talent Crunch for the Germany benefits. And I've spent some time already digging through the data, and I promised the people I will release it by the 30th. So I will spend a big portion of my weekend going through all the data and building correlations between the data sets. So that's going to be
we should have ended the broadcast before you said that.
Let them imagine. That's the wild part of my weekend, working with data sets. Either Excel, Google Sheets, GPT, please help me, trying to analyze a big survey for the German benefits. I can already tell you, I love what I'm seeing. The responses weren't too many, but I think it's so necessary to have this. And
share with me the results when you've done it, because that would probably be good Brainfood stuff, to be honest. So cool.
It's going to be available for free. I will find a way to make it available for free. That's what I promised when we launched it originally. And another thing, I started 75 Medium. Do you know what 75 Hard is? Have you ever heard of it?
Sounds like an exercise to me.
It's a mental strength challenge, they say. But so that's why I do a medium, because I don't have that much strength. So I started it today because I said I'm not starting any goddamn thing on a Monday anymore. Let's see how that goes. You have to check in with me in 75 days.
75 days. The number means days, and then what's going to happen after? What are you doing? Like, can
You
say?
have a number of things. So you have you have to drink a certain amount of water a day. You have to exercise a certain number of minutes a day. Blah blah blah. Read a certain number of pages or minutes. No alcohol or very limited. All sorts of things. There are in total, I think I have 5 that I have to stick with for 75 days. So I don't know if you've ever done anything like this.
Yeah, I did the press ups challenge, if you remember, a couple of years ago.
Really?
I started to do as many press ups as possible every single day, and just published as many press ups, as many sit ups every single day. And I just published 2 numbers onto Facebook every day. People were wondering what the heck are these numbers. I just kept publishing them because I thought my own record keeping. And then what was it? People started joining me. Other people started doing press ups. Yeah. Anyway, I got to about 99. I know 92, and I injured my shoulder, and I'm still injured, so don't do this. And I had to stop. Yeah. So basically, technically, get it right before you do stupid exercise. But anyway, yeah. That was I resonate with that experience. All right, listen, let me let you go. Thanks for dropping in last minute, Andrea. Massive.
My pleasure.
There. And yeah, we'll definitely get you back. So yeah, have a good weekend. Send me the results, and yeah, we'll be in touch soon. Okay.
You too. Have a lovely weekend, you and everyone else. Ciao.
That's right, Rob, Mr. Motivator right here. As I sit here contemplating what cake I'm going to eat for tea. All right. See you next week, folks.